This show is brought to you in part by viewers like you who joined a Patreon or become YouTube members. Thank you. And if you could, hit the like button and subscribe if you want more Browns-focused content.
What's up? I haven't done a hot take video in a while, so it's time for me to react to some of the takes that I see in the comment section. Not going to be a ton. I want to make sure I give every hot take its time in a way to differentiate this video format from the Q&A one. Sometimes when I take on like 10 hot takes, it feels like a Q&A video. I feel like it's kind of repetitive, so I'm going to try to keep the amount of hot takes I bring in low so I can go more in depth with these takes and argue against them or maybe even agree with them. So y'all tell me how y'all feel about that little change up, because I know that sometimes it could be a little bit similar to each other. I want to make sure it's a more different kind of feel when you watch a hot take video from a Q&A one. So the Ruck says this: if people want a high quality defensive tackle with low sacks, look no further than Haloti Ngata. He didn't get pressure, but he lived in the backfield of offenses. I would substitute pressure with sacks, because he did get pressure. He got pressure a ton of times. You even allude to it, right? No one ran on him, plus caused a lot of disruption in Baltimore's defense back in the day. That is the type of impact that Mason Graham can bring, in my opinion. I always have a hesitancy comparing a 3-tech to Haloti Ngata, because for my money, Haloti Ngata, like if we're talking about pure defensive tackles, right? Obviously, Aaron Donald is the greatest defensive tackle of all time, especially from a pass rushing perspective. But if we're talking about pure defensive tackles, Haloti Ngata is the best I've seen in my life, right? Like, just as far as like the ability to do the job, athletic ability to bend around the edge, and facilitate defensive chaos. Haloti Ngata is one of the best I've ever seen in my life. So I'm always hesitant to say a player could be like Haloti Ngata, and I don't think Mason Graham is the level of like freakish athlete Haloti Ngata was in his prime, so I wouldn't feel comfortable comparing Mason to Haloti. Where I feel comfortable with Mason is like a player like DJ Reader, but imagine if DJ Reader had amazing bend, was a little bit more athletic, and a little bit more powerful. That's what Mason Graham could be. It's like Jeffrey Simmons is a good comp for somebody like Mason, or like a smaller Vita Vea. It is a good comp for a guy like Mason. Still over 300 pounds, still very big, strong, like able to kind of disrupt and pull guys off of their assignments, like going to be hell for a guard to handle. And if you don't have your pull assignments correct, that play is just being absolutely disrupted. So while I will disagree with the Haloti Ngata comp, I just never feel comfortable giving anybody the Haloti Ngata comp. A player like Mason Graham that can disrupt, yeah, the casual fans, and I hate saying casual because most of the time you hear people say casuals, they're usually casuals themselves. But the fan that's not gonna really care about looking at all 22, your general fan, it's not really going to understand what Mason Graham brings to the table unless the play-by-play announcer or the color announcer is pointing it out regularly on the broadcast, right? And maybe some people will say, well, you don't draft that player top 5. I completely disagree. Guys like Haloti Ngata, guys like what Mason Graham could be, 3-techs that can really disrupt are the key to unleashing dominant defensive lines, dominant linebackers, right? Haloti Ngata, a lot of linebackers made a ton of money in Baltimore simply because Haloti Ngata was making their life very easy, right? Donnell Ellerbe got paid by somebody because Haloti Ngata was there making his life super easy, right? Terrell Suggs' career was a lot easier to maintain because, well, Haloti Ngata was there. I mean, you even look at somebody like Cam Hayward and what he does for TJ Watt. Like, people think TJ Watt's the best player on that defensive line. I would argue if you gave the Steelers defensive coaches truth serum, a good chunk of them would say Cam's better, right? Like, These three techs, they don't get love, but they're usually some of the most important pieces, especially in the Jim Schwartz system. It totally makes sense to draft that guy in the top 5 if you believe he could be that level of a difference maker. Wouldn't go to Haloti, not a levels, but I do think he can be his own thing where in 10 years we're like, hey, this guy reminds me a lot of Mason Graham. And I'm excited to see Mason kind of build his own path with guys in the trenches. Is probably not going to be dominant in year 1, right? It's probably going to take a couple of years for Mason to really reach his full potential. But I think once he gets there, the results are going to be pretty strong if he looks like how he did at Michigan. So, yeah, I'm a big fan of the Mason Graham pick. And I understand why some fans don't love it because it's not one of these positions that are easy to imagine what success looks like and how impactful that's going to be. But I don't have that issue. I love the defensive tackle position. I think it's one of the most impactful defensive positions in all of football. It's very underrated, and it's very hard to find guys who could disrupt at a high level and stay on the field in the NFL. And if you can get one of those guys, there is worth a top 5 pick as any other position in the draft. Obviously, quarterback's a little different, but any other non-quarterback position in the draft. Phil Cook says this: I'm cool on the Browns anti-fans. They hate the Browns QB situation, but they also wanted us to reach at quarterback for 2. They kind of want us to just show our bellies until the Deshaun Watson situation is over. So nothing is good enough. One dude even went as far to say that due to the guaranteed contract, Watson couldn't be placed on PUP, whatever. Yeah, I mean, there's just some people who have this wish fulfillment with what they want and need the consequences to be for the Cleveland Browns for trading and giving Deshaun Watson that contract, right? I think that has a lot to do with it. People don't just want to see Deshaun Watson fail, which has already happened. They want to see the Cleveland Browns fail clearly because of Deshaun Watson, which happened last year, right? But they don't just want it to end there. They want the Browns to basically be destroyed because they made this decision with Deshaun Watson. It's like endless need of vengeance because you made a decision I don't like, right? And I try to make myself be more understanding of when the Browns do stuff I don't like, just because obviously the Deshaun thing's a lot different because of off the field stuff. But I try to not get so wrapped up in what I want the team to do that I lose my mind when they don't do something I like. So I've been trying to get past this, but there are a lot of fans who do struggle with that, right? They didn't want the Browns to trade for Deshaun Watson. They didn't want the Browns to trade Baker Mayfield. And because of those two things, they want the Browns to fail forever, basically, right? To be punished for doing the thing I did not want them to do is really what it comes off as, right? Some people will yell, like you said, the Browns should draft the quarterback at 2. And a lot of people were arguing for the Browns to draft Shedeur Sanders at 2. But now that Shedeur Sanders is here on the roster as a 5th round pick, they're mad that we took him we didn't take him before we took Dylan Gabriel. Does it matter? It doesn't really matter what the order is, right? But the people, I find it fascinating that there are folks that wanted the Browns to take Shedeur Sanders at 2, were mad at me for suggesting that the Browns should not do that, and then the Browns get Shedeur in the 5th round, and some of these same folks are mad at the Browns for taking him in the 5th round because they took Dylan Gabriel before him. There's nothing they can do to make you happy if you're dedicated to not being happy about what the team is doing because you just want the team to only do what you want the team to do. That's not how that works. I put as much work as anybody into what I think the Browns should do, right? I'm not just saying shit off the cuff, saying shit. I'm doing film breakdowns and everything else and putting a lot of time that you can watch. And the Browns don't do something I want them to do. I can't sit here and just be mad at them because they didn't do what I wanted them to do. That's not a good way to cover the team. It's not a good way to root for the team, in my opinion. So I understand the frustration there. Some folks are just mad about that Baker Deshaun stuff. You got to give those people time. maybe they're just out, right? And you just got to replace them with new fans. Maybe they're always going to be anti-fans of the Cleveland Browns. But if you're somebody who's mad that the Browns didn't take a quarterback at 2, but you wanted them to take Shedeur and they ended up with Shedeur on the roster anyways, I don't know how you can be mad about this unless you just don't want to be happy about it. You want to find something to dislike. And at that point, me and you just ain't going to vibe like that, because that's not how I'll go about life. Like, if I went about life looking for shit to be upset about, I'd be mad all the time. Right? There's no shortage of stuff that I could be mad about. So I just choose not to live like that. Try to find what I enjoy, try to find my peace. El Torre says, cool and fun exercise. He's talking about when I did the schedule run through. While not being taken seriously, I think this exercise does present an interesting question. How long is the leash on any of these QBs, and is it best to go last because no one is behind you, or poor play just means we're consistently swapping out quarterbacks? It will be an interesting storyline. There is a question there, right? Because if you're Shedeur, I bet if you're Shedeur Sanders, you don't want Dylan Gabriel to start before you do, because there's a chance that Dylan can play and not let go of that job, right? But also, if you're Shedeur, you might benefit from Dylan playing and finding out about him, because by the time you go up, there'd be nobody to bench you for. So I do think the order in which these quarterbacks get pulled and swapped out is going to be interesting and consequential. And I hope the Browns have thought about that, because this feels like one of those things the Browns won't think about. Like, if I'm being honest, like, this feels like one of those things where I'm like real concerned if they've really given this thought, because this isn't an X's and O's thing. This isn't a thing that's on paper. This is more of a vibes thing. And the Browns, especially this front office, their strong suit isn't understanding the vibes, right? Like, they don't do great with the social stuff. And I'm a bit worried that they don't understand, hey, look, like, if you play Shedeur, you probably want to put him in last, because you want to see what that is, because what you don't want to do is play Shedeur 2 games, he looks bad, and then just immediately bench him, right? Like, I don't know. You're gonna have to use some tact here, right? And that's what makes me nervous about the Browns team and Shedeur, is whenever you're dealing with somebody that famous, whenever you're dealing with somebody with that much of a fan base, which we have before, right? Especially with Kevin, with Odell, there is a level of tact that you need to operate with that the Browns have not mastered, if I'm being honest with you, right? And that's what makes me nervous about it, right? They're not really great at handling that, and they don't really have the clout like a Andy Reid would to be able to do whatever the fuck he wants, and people would just be like, okay, well, it's Andy Reid. So that does make me a bit nervous about this whole thing. It has nothing to do with how I feel about Shedeur as a player or even Dylan Gabriel. And it's more about some of the more external factors that sometimes the Browns tend to overlook, right? We've lived through this with the Deshaun Watson thing, right? They're not great at predicting some of these external factors and preparing for them. I hope that has improved greatly with the Deshaun Watson experience, but that lack of prep for that is one of the reasons why I would be a little concerned about being confident in this Browns front office and head coach to handle what the external factors are going to be ultimately for Shedeur Sanders, right? Because if you think his fan base is out here now, this is like the diehards Shedeur fan base, right? The casual fans haven't even showed up yet. They're going to show up once the preseason starts. And it's not going to be what we used to, right? Like, there's going to be a million people in here misunderstanding what's going on in the preseason game. It's going to be a thing, is what I'm saying. More so than what we're already seeing now, like 3-4 times more. Can they navigate that properly, because they've struggled before? But that's my thoughts. Those are my hot takes. Let me know your hot takes down below. Peace.